We wanted to bring in our Nate Morabito, who's been doing a little bit of digging on this situation. So just a quick recap, of course, for folks who might just be now diving into the situation. We've learned this week, Nate, right, that there was, we thought it was a settlement, but it turns out a separation agreement to the tune of $305,000. But you're finding out this could be worth a lot more in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I mean, the word settlement is used, though, so let's be clear on that. The title of the document is separation agreement, but I looked through here earlier, I saw the word settlement. So
Okay.
Number one, call it what you want to call it. It's at least $305,000 worth of money that is taxpayer funded, that's going to the chief. Of course, this is tied to the war that former council member Tark Bakari kind of started between him and the chief over outer carrier vests. And it kind of boiled over. A lot of it was behind the scenes through text messages, but there was a real public press to get the chief to change his mind about these outer carrier vests after the Galway Drive shooting, which left 4 officers dead, and eventually he came around to it. Well, we know that City Council, or at least the majority of City Council, approved this settlement. We received a question from a viewer after this all finally came to light. The chief, in an effort to be transparent, released this settlement, this separation agreement, call it whatever you want, Sunday night to us. And the viewer said, well, what no one's really talking about is how this is going to affect his pension, his retirement. He's going to retire January 1, 2026. That was part of the agreement. He will get a severance, which does not impact his pension. But there is some money in the fine print here in the $305,000 that will ultimately increase his retirement benefits. So when you look at this separation agreement, it's worth more than $305,000 because every year when he retires now, he's going to be getting thousands of dollars more. And it's really complicated to get the math right on this. And I've tried multiple times today. Let me start by telling you the state treasurer is really who administers the state pension plan. Mm-hmm. And this is partially taxpayer funded, through the employers, but employees pay into it too. And the state says, look, because of state law, we can't release any information about what he may receive until after he retires and starts collecting. But there's a formula you can use, and there's also a calculator, an estimator you can use to figure out, well, how much is the chief potentially going to make here. I should point out that number one, he received a retroactive $14,000 raise for all of 2025. That's really important to note. And he also received a $45,000 retention bonus, which says it's pension eligible. This is important, and let me kind of explain why. And if I'm losing you, Vanessa, let me know, because you're looking like, uh-oh, we're going deep in the weeds here.
Well, no, I want to go in the weeds, so
okay.
Please, let's get into it.
Ready. Sharpen your pencils here. So the way that the state comes up with someone's pension, if you're a state or a local employee, is they take the highest paid 4 years in a row, the average of that payment. That's the starting number, okay? And I've scribbled out, and you don't need to see them in detail, but this is what it would have been if this separation agreement didn't happen and what it ended up being, okay? Mm-hmm. How his pay changed. His pay increased to essentially $340,000 this year because he got that retroactive increase and the retention bonus. Now, I'm really irritated with the city of Charlotte. I requested 3 weeks ago his personnel file. I'm not the only person who's done it. The Charlotte Observer posted all of these public records requests they made. They put an article out today that the city has not provided to them yet. Personnel file is important for a lot of reasons, but especially so that I can accurately know how much the chief made every year. Thankfully, there is some salary data out there that I was able to use to come up with our estimates today to try to figure this out. Because again, I need to figure out the 4 highest paid years in a row for him, which are the last 4 years, okay? So you do that, there's a formula, you have to multiply it by this number and then by the years of service, which for him it looks like it's 33 years and 7 months. May 1992 is when he joined the police force according to the city's website. So I do this formula and it looks to me like his pension, his retirement benefits, because of the separation agreement, have increased at least by $9,000 a year for as long as he's alive. So let's say that's 20 more years. That's $180,000 plus extra that he's receiving now that his pay was boosted this year. And again, this is the city of Charlotte that approved this settlement. This is the attorney with several members of City Council who said this is the best thing to do in this moment, based on concerns laid out in the separation agreement from the chief, saying that he felt like his rights were violated. And he was saying, I'm going to retire. If you all pay me this money, we don't need to go to court over anything. And they've kind of finally released this to the public. But it's just like, just when you think it's over, you keep learning more and more. And the biggest thing for me about this is public money that's involved. And so we really should know how our government's spending our money. And that way the public can make their own mind up here. Whether this was a good decision or a bad decision, the public, that's up to them to decide ultimately. And their representatives who approved this. Not everyone did, but enough did. And so I think that that's a really important point here, that when the City Council approved this, knowingly or unknowingly, they essentially inflated his retirement benefits in the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think you did a great job, by the way, explaining the reasons why this is getting inflated. I have a few more questions. I guess one of my questions would center around the role of the state auditor at this point, because, to your point, there were questions from the state auditor about, whether it was 1 penny or more, to paraphrase the letter that was sent to Mayor Vi-Lyles. People deserve to know how that money is spent. And we heard at the beginning of this week the state auditor releasing a brand new statement saying that they will continue to work with city officials as this investigation, I think they characterized it as wraps up or ramps down, something to that effect. But it feels like maybe there could be more in this case that they should be looking into. What do you think?
I don't know. That's maybe subjective. When I read the statement, I thought, okay, they're pumping the brakes a little bit here.
Yeah.
But they still have the oversight, right? They know that they finally pressured them to get to this point of releasing this. I certainly believe if they think that anything was done inappropriately or wasteful, the state auditor will continue its full court press on this. But it did feel like there was a little bit of grace given, based on my interpretation, that, okay, the city's starting to come around a little bit. But you also have the treasurer's office, too, that's going to dictate the retirement. And the prior chief, Chief Putney, had issues with his retirement agreement and his pay when he went to retire. So we don't really know what's going to happen there, if anything. And what is it, end of May? I mean, there's still a lot of time before this actually goes into place. I mean, several weeks ago, Vanessa, I also requested every payment, over a certain period of time the city gave the chief. The city of Charlotte has not given that to us. These are public records, And I think that that's the real challenge here. A lot of times when you get attorneys involved, they have a obligation to protect their client, which is the city, but which is ultimately the taxpayer. And you have taxpayer money, and the auditor has the authority to compel the city to turn this over if it really gets to that point. So we'll see whatever else may trickle down. I got the impression that maybe they're feeling like, okay, things have settled down a little bit. But every week since this all happened, I mean, it's just been one surprise after another at the city council. So I don't want to predict anything at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it's been certainly, I guess, a wild ride, to say the least, following the storyline. If I could go back to the records request, because you obviously have expressed frustration on that point. I feel like in some of these situations where, journalists or even the public, because the public can records request things as well, usually there's a deadline or a timeline by which, the agency has to get back to you. Is there a timeline that you've understood that they should?
There is no timeline in North Carolina.
Okay.
That's the core issue in North Carolina.
Yeah.
I worked in Tennessee for a long time.
Yeah.
In Tennessee, a very specific number of days.
Yeah.
South Carolina, a very specific number of days. In North Carolina, a reasonable amount of time. And that's up for interpretation. And I'll tell you right now, we requested the Audrey Kell principal's personnel file. This was Friday afternoon. Our assignment desk, we were talking about, we had heard that she hadn't been there, right, the big story in town. And so the assignment desk, we talked, and they requested the personnel file. It came within 1 business day to us. And that's why yesterday we were able to report she was suspended. It's been 3 weeks since the chief's personnel file was requested. That hasn't been provided. That's very simple. There are certain parts in there that they can release to us. Has he ever faced disciplinary action? We won't know that until they give us the records for it. I don't assume he has. How much has his pay changed over the years? I know what's in the salary database, but Is there anything else we're missing? So there really isn't a specific time frame, and that is something that has been argued for a long time. And the city of Charlotte has said in recent years, we're going to be better about this, because a lot of attorneys and the public file records requests. There's tons of them. It's not just the media. I mean, a lot of my friends do it a lot, and we wait a long time often, but sometimes the city does move a little bit quicker, and it just depends where they get hung up. This is clearly a situation where they're stuck with the city attorney, and I think for weeks they've been trying to figure out how they're going to handle the situation. And instead of handing over all the text messages and emails and closed minutes, what happens is the chief releases his settlement, credit for him for doing that. And now we have to wait for these records. I mean, there's been some records I've waited for like 3 years from the city of Charlotte for, and by then, who cares? You know, that people have moved on, unfortunately. And I'm not saying that's why they do that, but if the city council, the city wants to come off like they're being transparent, there is a process to move things along so that the public can trust them, ultimately.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've raised a few questions that you're trying to get answers to. Are there any other, I know it's tough to say because you alluded to the fact that the situation develops, it seems, daily, but are there any other loose ends that you feel like this story warrants wrapping up? Obviously, keeping in mind that the chief is still going to be here for the next few months, too.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know. You know, I go back to that press conference the city of Charlotte held earlier this month, where several members of council went up there and kind of shared their thoughts about the chief and how there's not corruption in the city, and kind of had to fight back some claims from another council member. And I'm thinking to myself, at some point, it might be worth it for all of these people to get in one place and publicly discuss this as much as they can, and say maybe there's some lessons that need to be learned. I believe Mayor Vilisle said as much at a city council meeting a couple weeks ago. We've got some things that we can do to improve moving forward. That is what we, the public, expect. You know, most of what happens in government, we take for granted, right? It's just happening behind closed doors by bureaucrats, people that are just going to do work every day. And then you have these decisions that leaders make, and they have to be accountable. And I'll tell you, I mean, I've been here now, 7 years. I grew up in Charlotte. I think that our leaders in this community in general are way too comfortable. They're comfortable in that they are rarely questioned. And I'm not just saying by me, by other members of the media, by the public. For whatever reason, I don't understand it here. And it takes something like this for everyone to kind of latch onto it. But accountability goes a long way. And I think I said this the other day when Tijuana Brown was facing her situation, a city council member who got indicted, who claimed she's not guilty for PPP fraud and wire fraud. Anytime I've called her, she's answered the call and answered the questions. And I think that says something about what we expect from as the public. You're not going to do it all the time, but when things are going kind of off the rails, it feels, it is helpful to just answer the questions. And maybe you are not allowed to answer the questions. I think the city tried to do that at that press conference, but so much of this hadn't even really come out yet that it feels like another cycle would be helpful to really show the public that they mean well and they're working in their best interest. I'm not saying they're not. I just know the public, I think, would welcome hearing more from them, because there is a real frustration about how this all played out from the people that I've heard from.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like we should mention too, in some of the cases where we do see the community maybe rally around a specific cause and be very dogged and determined in speaking with city officials, whether that's showing up to public comment, sections during council meetings or whatnot. I feel like that sends a message, and in some cases it reaps the outcome that group in the community wanted to see. So I feel like folks shouldn't take for granted the power that they have too in this situation to call for accountability. That's what they want.
Your voice matters, and I think that Julie's reporting yesterday was really a great example about the airport workers that went there in a peaceful way. That's all we're suggesting. Peacefully sharing your opinion so that there's a person-to-person conversation. So there is not a keyboard and a computer screen. There's not even a phone call, I guess is better, but just some kind of communication with your elected leaders when things are good and when things are there that you disagree with. That's how we become constructive and improve. And I think that for whatever reason, and I get it, I think I'm in it too. I mean, life is very busy, and you kind of have to pick things that affect you. And I just think that sometimes, you see issues become big, and then most of the time they don't, for whatever reason. And then we'll move on to whatever the next big story is. If anything good has come out of this, it's that this has led to this conversation now for weeks. And there's been a lot of great reporting on it, too. I mean, a lot of my colleagues and competitors have done really great work to help shine the light on this, and we're getting closer to whatever the truth is. But because of the law, I don't know that we'll ever get the truth either.
I think, too, and because you pointed this out, I feel like I wanted to, talk a bit more about this, the fact that this body of reporting in general, multiple outlets, I feel like I heard that from, Michael Graff, who we had here on Live Impact News Monday. He's the reporter who broke the settlement story, but he called out us as, for example, one of the outlets where, he felt like, as a group, as journalists, he felt like we were getting at whatever the truth might be together and kind of collectively moving towards this singular goal.
I mean, it's so critical, too, and that's what I love what we've done. I mean, Julie can focus on the day-to-day of what's happening with this. My role is to kind of, behind the scenes, figure out what's really going on. And that's not going to always go viral, but this is the truth that we're seeking ultimately. And so that takes time, and it takes resources. And there are some really great journalists in this community that have done a great job. Some are institutional. They've been here a very long time. They have great contacts. And I think it really takes all of us. I mean, if there's no winning and losing here. It's like if we're all getting closer and scratching the surface beyond there to figure out what the truth is deeper down, I think we're all winning in the end. The community is winning, and I've seen that throughout this process. Yeah.
And before we wrap it up, the only other thing that I feel like I just want to reiterate, you said this too, whatever the truth is not for us to decide, and we're not making a call on that, as journalists. But to your point, it's about finding out what the truth is. And it's up for the public to decide whether they think that this was a good thing or not, because they could very well find out all the details and be like, yeah, all right. Or they might see it and go, but that's not us to just,
Yeah,
that's
and
not our
I
call.
think we've not tried to suggest that in any way. All we're trying to say is that whoever's listening right now, whoever's voting, whoever lives in these districts, whether it was good or bad in your opinion, you should be reaching out to your council members for every major issue that has the potential to impact you. It's so important, and again, I think it's just critical that they hear from people to know that, it's not some void out here. There are real people that are working hard every day. That's what the Taxpayer Protection Alliance basically says. I mean, these are hard-earned tax dollars that people are paying to their city, to their county, to their school board, and they want justification that what they're spending, they're going to get a return on that. And you don't know that without the information. And so that's what we're trying to do, a little bit at a time, but at least we're getting something. And again, I give the chief credit. He released this information, and at least we now have seen the separation agreement.
Yeah.
That's a step towards really getting a better understanding of what this is all about. Now we know it's worth a little bit more than what the agreement says because of the pension implications. But who knows what tomorrow or Friday brings? I mean, or next week. It's just, I don't think this story in particular is going away, particularly because there's so many public records requests still out there that a lot of us are waiting on.
Well, we appreciate you keeping us posted and also taking the time here, on Live Impact News. Can you remind folks what time your reporting is coming up tonight?
Yep. My main story will be on tonight at 6 o'clock. I'll be there in studio with you guys, and then I'll be on briefly at 5 o'clock, and, hopefully we'll get a web story out before then, too. We're finishing touches on that right now as well.
Yeah.